Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, that is Tim, who's freshly shaved. Look at him, he's all young looking, this is weird.
Yeah. Baby face.
So, we talk about horror movies on this show, and this episode, specifically, is actually the winner of our Patreon vote for the past month. Every month on Patreon, the $5 members and up get to vote between 4 movies that are usually part of a theme. In this case, it was all winter-based movies, and the winner was The Thing from Another World, aka the original Thing, as in, later on we got John Carpenter's The Thing, and then later on we got the kind of remake, kind of prequel, from like 2011. Best not remember that one so much.
I mean, is this really a winter movie, or does it just take place in the in the Antarctic?
The snow, it feels wintry. I mean, okay, I get your argument that it's set in a place where there's always snow. Okay, that's fair. But yeah, it's a winter movie.
Okay. Just checking.
It fits the mood. It fits the mood of winter.
Sure.
Do you disagree?
No.
Alright then. So yeah, we're going to talk about The Thing from Another World. So we'll start spoiler free. We'll warn you about spoilers before we get into it. Somewhere in the middle, and that's how this is going to go. So what is The Thing from Another World? All in the fact that it's got a pretty cool title. It's funny because obviously I think most of us are probably more familiar with the later version. Widely regarded as one of the better remakes of all time, mainly because it's not really a remake, it's just an adaptation of the same source material, but much more accurate, from what I understand. I've never read the source material myself, so I can't actually attest to how much it is, per se. But certainly this is a very different film, other than the fact that it's got the very similar setting. It's got the snowy Antarctic setting. I mean, the opening of the movie, the very first scene we see after the titles is someone coming in from the snow and complaining about how cold it is and warming up at the fire. So I think right away you get this mood of, okay, it's really snowy outside, we have to try and warm up, and you've got that kind of thing. So the snow acts as isolation, and a pilot, sorry, not a pilot, a captain of a small squad from the Air Force, and he's like sort of navigator and he's a second officer, get called to this army base, or the science base in Antarctica, where they have called out for help. A journalist who we meet at the start of the movie with them goes along too, and they go there and try and find out, okay, so what's happening, why have you called for help? And there's been a weird reading, some sort of unidentified object, which seems to not be a meteorite because of how it landed, how it kind of moved when it came in, seems to have landed in the snow and caused a lot of sort of weather problems, from the kick up of the snow and whatnot. So they go out to investigate it, and sure enough, there's an alien spaceship underneath the ice, and there's a survivor, there's an alien person, an alien monster of some kind in there. And because it's
thing, if you will.
A thing, if you will, yes. And because it's the 1950s, it is basically just a tall man in makeup. And do you know what I think is funny? Is that it's in black and white, obviously, the movie, but he's green. Like, you can just tell, for some reason, you just know that the makeup on him is green. But it's basically just a big tall guy with some, makeup on and some, a sort of head prosthetic and some sort of clawy-looking fingernails. And that's kind of... So it's basically, they're in this Arctic base, and they're trying to, fight off this alien monster. Very different from the later movie, which of course is about a monster that can kind of infect people and can take over and impersonate people, whereas this is just more typical round around trying to hide from the monster and try to figure out ways to fight him back, and what are his weaknesses, what aren't his weaknesses, and that's kind of it. So a 1950 sci-fi movie, kind of at its core. So Tim, before I asked you if you liked it or not, had you seen this before? Was this a first time watch?
This is my first time, yeah.
Okay, cool. So, did you like The Thing from Another World?
Oh boy, I was kind of hoping you wouldn't ask me that. Yeah, it's...
What are the chances?
Well, no, the reason why I'm a little hesitant is because I don't really feel super strong about it one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say I hated it, but I definitely didn't love it. I actually did like, the scenes with the alien. It is a cheap 1950s, black and white B movie sci-fi alien, but that has its charm and that's kind of fun. The only problem is that there's long stretches where we don't get that kind of stuff, and it kind of just dragged on and bored me. Like not to the extent where like I was ripping my hair out and saying like, oh, this is so shitty. I can't take it. But also not to the extent where I was like, ooh, I'm really excited. I want to see where this is going. So I don't know. It just kind of felt middle of the road to me.
I think I like it a bit more than you, but I also agree that I don't love it. I think it's definitely inferior to the later version by
Without a doubt.
quite a margin. I think it's a bit goofier, it's a bit sillier with the monster, but I do like the setting. I like them dealing with the cold. I like them dealing with this monster. I think the characters, they're not particularly deep, but they are for the most part likable. I think right at the start of the movie, you get introduced to them. You kind of like get a sense of who a few of them are. Although that said, there's one or two that I thought they set up right at the start that the captain has been up here before and he knows the girl who works there, and there's maybe a bit of a history. And when he meets her again, she's very likable right away. Where he's pissed at her because apparently she played a prank on him, where she drew on him or put like a bit of paper on him, a sign on him when he was asleep. And everyone that he works with is still kind of joking about it. They're still making fun of him for it. So he's kind of mad about it. In a jokey way, but right away they've got chemistry and they're sort of like, oh, it's okay, right? So I can see where this is going with those two, but they actually never really do anything with them.
No, not really. It never.
Like later on in the movie, like they have a couple more moments, but from this point on, I was expecting them to like grow closer and like that be a big plot of the movie, and it never actually does that.
I kind of kept waiting for, and to be fair, this isn't the movie's fault, but just coming in with expectations, from the remake, is I thought there was going to be some type of like doppelganger or mimic situation where like the alien would be pretending to be one of those humans, which doesn't happen. But yeah, I kept thinking something like, oh, maybe like that woman is actually going to end up being the alien at some point.
Oh no, it's much more straightforward than just alien try to get in, try to barricade doors and burn it with fire and whatnot. It's really really simple in that sense. But I think that does have its charm. Like I do have fun with the movie because it is kind of just a straightforward. I mean, I love a bottle movie. I say that time and time again, and that's really what it is. It's set in this one location where they're trying to keep this thing outside and keep themselves safe, and there's some fun ideas that pop up with them kind of theorizing like where this thing comes from, like how it works physically and all that kind of stuff. We'll talk about that in spoilers because I think that's a bit more specific.
Yeah.
And there's some fun moments. There's actually a really impressive sequence with fire, because obviously it's just a stuntman being set in fire, but it really feels like as soon as they pour this like kerosene over him, like the entire room just lights up, and I'm like, man, this is actually really dangerous looking. Like, well, however they did this, like, I'm sure it was somewhat safe, and however they mapped it out, but it looked really vicious and kind of like, oh, okay, right. In a movie where I'm so used to, like early on when they're standing over the ice and they keep saying that they can see a spaceship through it, there's never a shot where you can see it. It's just them telling us they can see a spaceship through the ice.
Take their word for it.
Yeah. So it's definitely cutting a lot of corners in this, and not in a lazy way, just in the sense that we don't have the effects or the money or whatever to show you this, so we're having to cut those corners. And then this fire scene comes later on. I'm like, whoa, they just like they gave me one impressive effect. I'll give them that. Where this was just really well done.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to my point of like anytime they were dealing with the alien or the alien was on screen, like I was really like hooked into it and like, okay, this is actually pretty cool. And obviously it's very dated, but I think it still looks good. As if you like that kind of aesthetic, if you don't mind stuff that's a little older. But yeah, it's just a lot of the moments in between that like again, it wasn't mind-numbingly boring where like you have to like stab yourself in the leg to wake up. Like it wasn't that level, but
what a glowing bit of praise. You didn't want to stab yourself.
Well, it wasn't like that last older movie we did. I forget, like the the swamp that has eyes or
The
whatever.
Night Has Eyes, I believe is
That's
the
it.
title. Yes.
Yeah, like that movie. Like Jesus Christ, I'd have to like hook a car battery up to my nuts to stay awake for that one again. But yeah, this one it was a little slow, but not as like
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, that movie was so hard to talk about that I ended up having to cut out like 5 minutes of that review, because this isn't in the video or the audio version. Like, if you go and watch it now, but in the original there was like a 10-minute discussion of what the exact definition of the Moors was, and we looked up what countries have lots of Moors, and we were surprised with some of the results. It was horrible. It was awful. I cut it all out. It was terrible. So
We ended up having to call Alan Moore to see.
That was a terrible joke. But no, I guess the point I'm making is that if stuff gets really bad in a recording, I will cut it out. I do think of your time. I don't want to waste it that much. For the record.
I wish you'd think of my time, but
Never, Tim. Never. You know, if their time's one currency, then yours is another. Like, you're like the I don't know, like you're like a yen, like 1 yen versus $1.
if I knew anything about current, exchange rates, I would probably be insulted. But
Well,
I'll take it as a compliment for now.
I don't know what the exchange rate is. I just know that when you talk about buying something in Japan in yen, you're always talking about hundreds or thousands. You're never just saying 10 yen. It's always like, if you're buying bread, it's like that's like 300 yen.
And how much is a Donnie yen?
Oh, he's quite pricey. Donnie Yen's at least a few million, I think, to get him.
Jesus, I was gonna make a point, but what happened with that movie where like it was the future and like instead of currency, people used time? I think Justin Timberlake was in it.
Oh, it was in time, because I remember when it came out, there was jokes about just in time.
Oh, okay, I get it. So was that good, or
I never saw it.
But,
Yeah.
oh, interesting. Well, maybe we'll do it soon for the show.
It wasn't a horror movie, but the only thing I've seen of that movie actually is I've seen a GIF of there's a car crash in it in the movie that's really, really badly done, where it's like a car flipping down the side of a hill, but you can clearly see the entire time that there's no one in the car. It's like just a little like model going down. It's weird, especially for a newer movie. You think they just do it with CG, but whatever.
I kind of miss in like old movies and TV shows where like they would show someone driving and then someone would just be like, "Oh no, a cliff," and then it would just cut to like stock footage of a obviously empty car just going down a cliff.
No, I concur. Back to the thing, however, we got off track there. Yeah, I think the characters are likable. I think the problem with because I actually kind of like a lot of these older sci-fi movies where a lot of it is just kind of talking about the threat rather than there being a lot of action, because I kind of like the whole idea where it's very theoretical. They're talking about ideas rather than very specific sort of specific moments, right? I think
there's a lot of that in this, I would say.
There is a lot of that, but I think it suffers a little bit because the core debate that is brought up, I don't think they set the characters up enough to really do it as much justice. Because the whole thing where the scientist is like, no, we have to preserve them and we have to like open them up, because at first they want to keep them in the ice and not melt them and whatever, and the scientist wants to do that, and then when it starts to wake up and kill people, the scientist's like, no, we can't kill it, this is like a great find for science, that's like a big thing. And I feel like that's actually an interesting idea. You have this debate between the soldier who just wants to keep them safe and the scientist who wants to study it for mankind. And I feel like that is something that is there that could be done well, but I feel like a lot of it falls a little bit flat, mainly because the scientist just blatantly starts ignoring the fact that everyone, like, how are you going to study if it's killing you? There's never any kind of sense to it in this.
He does a very like stereotypical scientist thing where he kind of is of the mindset that like oh no, this is like a superior life form, which I feel like whenever someone says that in a movie, it's always kind of like, is it? I don't know, that doesn't seem so great.
I think he means genetically, Tim. Not so much that he seems like a blast to hang out with, or
I mean, hey, I'd put my genes up to that guy's any day.
So I think that's a fault of the movie. I do think it's a fun watch though. I think it's a nice, easy 80 minute. Uh, you know, I think it's a fine watch. It's just not. I think there's a reason why people don't talk about this one that much, but everyone talks about the 82 one.
I would say if you're like a diehard Thing fan, that you want to know like every aspect about it, then it'd probably be worth checking this out of curiosity.
Well, I think also I'd add to that, if you're a fan of just sci-fi B movies, then I think you'll get a lot out of it because if you like that type of movie.
Especially like if you don't mind something a little older, like some people are like super like, oh, I don't watch anything past the 80s or whatever, which is dumb, but
well, no, Tim, that was people who are our age in school. Imagine what kids in school now are saying. They're like, oh, I'm not watching anything before 2000. Like, wow, okay.
Oh my god. I didn't think about it, but
makes you want to strangle them all, doesn't it?
But I think it's like it's a interesting foreign watch. I don't know if it's something I'd be super into wanting to watch again, but I am glad that I saw it. At least this once.
For the record, I had seen this before, and I enjoyed it well enough the first time. I enjoyed it well enough this time. I will say though that I'd forgotten most of it. Like it wasn't that memorable, and I feel like I'll again forget a lot of it. But hey, I think we'll give a spoiler warning, and we'll talk about some specific plot points and details that I think we might want to discuss. Namely, what the thing actually is, because they actually end up with an arm, because when the thing wakes up and gets outside, it kills like a couple of the dogs that are out in the snow, which seems really, I mean, I know they're dogs, but still, bring them in with the heat. let them, don't let them outside in the blizzard, which is apparently so bad they can't communicate with anyone, because they can't get any orders. But, so there's the thing, like, it fights the dogs, but... Oh, how do you go?
But I was just gonna say it ends up being like the thing I hate the most.
Was that maybe a joke?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I hate vegetables. I'm just.
I can't wait until we've got 10 of these, just so we can get the box set 10 things I hate about aliens.
Okay.
I want 10. I want 10 thing movies, and then we get the 10 things pun on the box set. I think that's what we want. But yeah, so but its arm gets bit off, and they actually have its arm, so they start testing it, and the scientists are looking at it, and basically they discovered that it's a vegetation-based animal. The idea being that on whatever planet he's from, he evolved from vegetables instead of like us with primates and other life, and because of that, it can regenerate and it can grow more of himself and all crazy things. But one of the characters does point out feels kind of silly. Like, you're telling me this is a super carrot. This hunting is. It's like, well, in a sense, yeah, this is a super carrot. I'd completely forgotten this was a vegetable monster. From my first viewing, so that was like an amusing find. How did you find the vegetable spin in the plot, Tim?
I was like, this is interesting, but it's also, I don't know, it didn't seem very veggie-like to me. Like I would have thought it would have maybe looked more like a Swamp Thing kind of aesthetic.
Oh sure, yeah,
whatever. But I don't know, it didn't seem like the vegetable aspect I think is interesting, but it seemed like it didn't really go like much anywhere other than I guess maybe like the regrowing and stuff. But...
Yeah, which never really actually happens. It just kind of like he's trying.
It's just a way.
Yeah,
well, it's just to let you know why he still has an arm when you see him next.
Well, I mean the actual proper like growing more of them, because they set that up and he's trying to grow more of them, but it never actually goes anywhere because they solve it before it happens. But like I said, that impressive scene where they actually set him on fire and they keep throwing more kerosene over him, I thought that was a really impressive little sequence with the fire.
Yeah, that looks really cool. And then just the way he kind of barges in, and he kind of has like these like stiff movements, but in a very like classic like B movie monster kind of way. And
it's very Frankenstein's monster, I think, the way he walks around.
And like But yeah, like you said, it looks it's a really cool scene. Like I thought it like looked kind of dark, and then once everything kind of lights up, it's like nice and bright, even though it's black and white, obviously. But you can tell it's kind of funny because just watching, you can tell like, oh wow, that guy is really on fire.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's so much so that I was thinking that even when we're throwing more kerosene, I thought that looks really dangerous, just throwing this like flammable stuff at him. Because every time they did it, it looked like it went on some of the walls, and more of the walls would go on fire.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, geez. I guess it was a nice contrast thing as well, because most of the movie's been so snow focused that seeing all this fire was just like, okay, this is the opposite. Okay. Because honestly, the snow setting is probably my favorite thing about the movie. It's just like them fighting the cold the entire time, and especially later on when the thing like shuts off the heating system, so they're kind of all huddling into the generator room because they've got a few electric based heating things with some coats on, and they're
and it all looks really nice. I don't know if they just did that all on a soundstage.
I think so, yeah. At this time period, this would have all been soundstage.
Yeah, because I mean, it looks like the Antarctic. I mean, it definitely did like a good job, like all those outdoor scenes and everything.
Well, the outdoor scenes might have been on location, but
Okay.
honestly, I think the black and white helps them a little bit hide kind
Sure.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of the weird things actually. Is if you watch The Mist in black and white, suddenly the kind of not great CG suddenly looks quite good because taking
That's
the color
true.
away actually hides a lot of it. So I think the snow, for example, snow can often look quite fake, but having it in black and white, even though snow's white anyway, I know that. Like but it somehow helps kind of hide it a little bit. But yeah, it's the whole thing. So no, you do kind of cheer a little bit when the scientist gets like bonked because he tries to reason with the monster. He's like, "I think you're a superior being. I'd like to learn things from you," and he just whacks him. It's great. Very fulfilling.
Yeah. Yeah, that guy was not really like a villain, but maybe like the closest out of like the core group to.
Yeah, well, because he like has people on guard in the vegetation room, knowing that he'll probably come back. He doesn't tell the captain, he doesn't tell the soldiers or whatever, and because of that, he gets like 2 men killed. So he's
That's
very so from that point on, he's very unsympathetic because he's went off the deep end. Because at least before that point, when he was arguing with the captain and they were debating, oh, we should do this or no, we should do this for science. You at least kind of got his point of view until they started killing people, and it was like, oh, okay, right now you have no basis to argue any of this. Because ultimately he's like, oh no, like our deaths are worth the knowledge that this might like garner for future generations, and the captain and the rest of the guys are like, yeah, no.
Kind of feels almost Lovecraftian in a way. I feel like that's something that happens in a lot of his stories. Is you have like the person that kind of succumbs to like the will or the madness of like these greater beings and is willing to sacrifice like any or all human lives for the glory of it.
Yeah.
For the glory of this plant, man.
I mean, honestly, there's not a whole lot of other things that I could really point out and say, oh, that's really... Because I think the cast are decent. I think the characters are likable, even though they don't really get enough story. I wouldn't praise the direction necessarily. I think it's a very simple... It's just a sign of the times more than anything, but... there was very few moments where I thought, oh, that was a good shot, or that was a really well edited together little sequence, or whatever. It's a very basically shot movie. But again, it's kind of signs of the times. I can't really criticize it for that. But it's the sort of thing where in a modern movie, if the plot was this thin, like maybe the technical side, maybe the cinematography would be what elevates it and says, no, it might be a simple plot, but it's beautiful and it looks like every frame you could hang on the wall as a painting. You could like print out that pause it, print it out, put it on the wall. You can't do that here. Like nothing's like that visually. I think the closest it maybe gets is when they're on top of the ice and they're looking at the ship and they like stand in that big circle. It's like, okay, this looks kind of sort of visual moment where they're kind of like working out the size of the ship and whatnot.
Yeah, I can see that. The other, I guess, kind of big alien sequence, which I enjoyed, not as much as a fire, but the like electricity trap kind of thing, I thought was cool too. Like,
yeah, I do like. Obviously, it's one thing I love about horror movies like this, because I think what's funny about this is that it starts off kind of like a slasher movie where the monster's picking off victims one by one, but then it becomes a monster movie because it's about like them all coming together and like trying to figure out how to beat them and like trying things like fire and trying things, various ideas. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea. I realized it kind of, I mean, not at the time. I think when it was made, no one would have made this distinction. But for us in a post-slasher movie world, I think the first half is very slasher movie, and then it turns into a more traditional like monster movie in the second half.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but I can see that.
Yeah, but anyway, so the monster movie thing they'll do at the end is they'll try to trap him. They know he's going to come for the generator because that's where they're getting all their heat, and they basically create a new like sort of path of like like of wood, of planks on the floor, but they've got it all rigged to electrocute him, so they're just waiting until lure him in. And what's really funny is that he's not actually walking on it because there's like space at the sides to walk as well, and he's walking down the side. And basically the tactic to get him on there is one of them throws something at him, and he just like sort of like dodges it by going onto the main path, and then that's when they electrocute him and beat him. And it ends with this kind of like it's meant to be meaningful, but it's not really. Where the journalists like finally they can finally communicate, and they finally get the radio back so they can talk to people. And the journalist is like, right, are there reporters there? Right, this is your story. And he's like talking into the mic, and he's like, tell this to whoever you can, wherever they are. Tell everyone, watch the skies. Keep watching the skies. Almost as if it's setting up for a sequel. Like there might be more of these things coming at some point or something like that. But
it's also just really funny, like watching it nowadays, like to think of, oh, there was a time where, like, in a movie they would have it where the government trusted the news like so much, so they would just let this reporter come like onto this army base with these big like crazy top secret things happening.
Yeah, that is a very fair point because there's no objection to him being there. It's not until they actually realize they're dealing with an alien and a UFO where the captain goes, hey, you can't talk about this shit until we like clear it with the the higher ups. And then he whines about, yeah, but this is my story, then someone else will get it if I don't take it. This is the biggest story of all time. And I'm like, maybe that's why you shouldn't have brought him to your secret, science research base. Just a thought. It's a very weird person to bring on said mission. But, hey,
yeah.
But no, I think it's a fun movie. I think it's a fun movie that's maybe not the most memorable. It's kind of like, I think you expect because it's called The Thing. It's like this big title from the past. You're like, oh, this must be a notable movie, and I don't think it is. I think it's a decent sci-fi 50s B horror movie.
Yeah,
with likable enough characters, decent enough sort of moments and effects, but nice setting, and sort of nice sort of bottle movie like tactics of trying to like, because they try a few different things to try and kill them, and it's nice seeing them try and be proactive and do different things, but that's kind of what it is. Straightforward though.
Yeah.
There's very little nuance. The Carpenter movie's full of like nuance about paranoia. This is just kind of like, if anything, the characters kind of like screw themselves by not being paranoid enough about each other because the scientist gets away with all this stuff because no one seems to be thinking he might be up to something bad. So
yeah, I feel like that, like all the paranoia and the tension that's in John Carpenter's The Thing, that's where like he really like struck gold. And it's if you had to compare the two movies, I think that would be the big thing that's missing from this original one. Like you said, it's good enough. I think if you you kind of know what you're getting into if you're gonna watch it, like like we said, 1950s sci-fi alien monster movie. If that's your thing, if those are the kind of movies you like, I think this is definitely a good one that you would dig. If it's not your cup of tea, then wouldn't really be any reason for you to watch it. But
well, that's like a summary that was going to end in a rating, so just roll that right into your rating out of 10, Tim.
Yeah, so again, I can't say I overly liked it, but I can't say that I overly hated it either. I thought it was slow at parts, but I did like the parts with the aliens. So again, it's right down the middle for me, which is what my rating's going to be. I'm just going to give it a 5 out of 10, just straight down.
That seems a touch harsh to me. So, no, I think I'm going to go with a 6.5. It's a fun 50s sci-fi horror B movie. I don't think there's a lot of weight there, though. I think it's just very basic kind of monsters try to get in, we need to fight back kind of movie. That's basically what it is. I mean, you could argue they're trying to go for something with the whole, should we let science study it even at the expense of like the lives of the people who are there? Like there is a debate there. I don't know if it necessarily pulls off that debate though. So
yeah,
but no, 6.5 out of 10 for me. I do recommend watching it if you're into these type of movies. But no, so I guess that's the thing. So that was our vote for the month. There is a vote for next month, of course. It's alligator/crocodile themed. So our patrons can go and vote in movies in that category, should they wish, sometime this month. And we'll do that sometime next month. Also, I've mentioned The Crypt before, which is another Patreon thing where you can pick movies as often as you want onto a to-do list, and then every so often we will pick one off that list, the Crypt list as we call it. We did one just recently. We did My Little Eye last week, so we do get to them eventually. Sometimes, it's a thing. But it's just a fun way to have the viewers and listeners send in movies for us to do. So you can get all that stuff over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Link to that in the description, in the corner of the video. Of course, it's just beyond the extras you get, it's basically just a way to support us and say you like the show and like the channel and keep us doing what we do. But no, so that's cool. Let us know what you think of The Thing from Another World in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. Get us on Twitter at mailed_fudge for channel updates. Tim, if they want to find you on Twitter, I've not asked you this in a while. Where can they find you?
Well, pretty much any social media thing. It's just at Tim Vargulish. So yeah, hit me up. Send me a message. Let me know what your favorite horror movie is. I'll let you know if you're right or wrong.
What's the right answer according to you, Tim the boy?
It's up there.
You can get me on Twitter at Wibble89. So go do that. But there you go. That does. So thank you very much once again for watching. We will see you next time with another horror movie. The next 3 episodes we do will all be Christmas movies, so you can look forward to that. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, guys. We'll see you next time.